Okay, so how are we doing, everybody? Welcome to the Habit Shift. We are on to episode 15. And today, well, most weeks, we have all of us here, except for last week. We have Ian and Sarah and Jeff and myself, Sandy. So how are you all doing today?
Good, thank you.
I'm very well, Sandy. I missed you last week. I was able to get a word in edgeways, and it felt different. I was able to talk without someone there at the same time.
All right, so in this episode, we are going to be touching on alcohol, and I guess probably not just for fat loss, but how it affects everything, our everyday lives, our sleep as well. So who would like to kick off with, let's start with, we know what alcohol is. So who wants to kick off with that?
Well, alcohol is sometimes considered the fourth macronutrient, isn't it? And it has 7 calories per gram. So it's only just down in calories from fat. But unlike the other 3, it has no nutrients for us. So, it has no benefit other than making people feel good or bad, depending on how much you have of it.
I guess the thing is with alcohol is that people can tend to use it as a stress release. I've had quite a few clients, saying that after they finish work, that's the thing that they turn to because they've been stressed out all day, and they get home and it's that one thing that they think is going to, I guess, relieve that stress. The dogs are excited. The dogs are out.
Yes, they're barking at squirrels.
Oh, okay. So do you guys get that a fair bit with your clients?
I do. I find that alcohol is probably the one thing, especially more. I was going to say more for the guys, actually. I think where women might emotionally eat and they might go for chocolate or crisps or ice cream or whatever, I think the guys tend to turn to a drink more. But it is a common thing I find with a lot of people that drink. It's come the end of the day. That's how they unwind. They're looking at the clock for 5 o'clock or 1 o'clock or whatever. And that is the first thing they go to. And, that's okay on occasions, but if you're only having it to get through your day or as a reward, then perhaps you could look for an alternative, I think, because it depends where that leads, doesn't it? I mean, for one of my clients, it always leads badly because 1 always leads on to 5, and then 5 leads on to raising the fridge. So 1 drink becomes, in his own words, several thousand calories. So, when he's on one of his weight loss periods, then that isn't helpful to him at all.
Yeah, I guess for me, it will tie into the kind of the emotional eating, emotional drinking side of things. And a lot of people use it as a stress management tool. And then they build up this association with like drinking or eating or anything like with a coping mechanism. And I think all too often people start like, the end of a busy day, they want to relax and they've associated having a glass of wine, and quite often that can turn into a larger glass of wine, into 2 glasses of wine, into a bottle of wine. I mean, this might sound weird, but you can see walking around houses where we live in the UK, you get your recycle bin collected every 2 weeks. So you can see the bottle bin, and just obviously just through pure observations, you can see how much people can consume in a fortnightly basis. And obviously I walk the dogs, so you walk past quite familiar houses, and it's just a noticeable thing for me if I see a bottle bin massively full of wine and stuff like that, and that's on a kind of consistent basis, you can just think to yourself, well, clearly it's not they have an issue, but the habitual consumption of alcohol is something that is done.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, again, it's always, it depends, isn't it? You know, I mean, you know, from a health perspective, that would imply that people were drinking more than the units that is recommended per week.
Yeah. And what you were saying before, Sarah, about men, I think it's equally men and women. And I sort of tend to find that women will follow what other women, you know, their friends are doing. You know, it just seems to be, you know, I don't want to feel left out. So they just go along with what everybody else is doing. I don't know whether you guys agree. What do you think about that, Jeff?
Yeah, you know, and this was an interesting topic, and I think I've mentioned it before that I really don't have a lot of experience with the whole alcohol side of things because I drink a little bit myself, not much. I've never really had family members who struggled with drinking. They might have a glass of wine here or there or a beer here or there, and so I've never really been around it personally. And then and as I was thinking about it coming into this particular episode, I really haven't had clients where it's been a struggle. So it's something that I haven't really had to deal with, which is kind of surprising to me. But I guess it just depends on kind of where you get clients from. And yeah, so I really haven't had to deal with that with people, and so it's really interesting. But in just kind of some of my friends and things talking on social media, you do hear them talking about it somewhat. And yeah, I can see what you're talking about there, Sandy, with kind of the going along with the crowd and that kind of thing. You know, there are a lot of it's sort of implied that you know, wine is a good way to unwind at the end of the day and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because I think for most people that do drink, they actually really enjoy it. And I think that's the trouble. I always sort of say to my clients, it's a bit like an opposing magnet, because they're trying to limit or alter something that they don't really want to limit or alter. So then you've always got that, oh, I know I should do it, and then it becomes a should rather than wants to. And when it's a should, that never really works properly. And I definitely find that it's sort of, you know, it's like trying to ask people to give up something that actually they just really like doing, and that's quite tough. Yeah,
it becomes an habitual thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, one leads on to, oh, I'll just have another one, and then I'll just have another one, and I can sort of remember when I sort of first started drinking, I guess, wine, and it all started sort of with my mum, going to visit my mum, and my sisters would come around, and then we'd have a glass of wine because it was on like a Friday night that we'd go and see her, and it just sort of became a thing. And you know, one bottle led into another bottle, you know, between all of us. But you never sort of really thought about it. And then, you know, I guess for me, I just ended up I would still only limit myself to a bottle, but I'd still drink the whole bottle at least every weekend, if not every second weekend. But, you know, when I got into competing, it wasn't really something that I really wanted to waste my calories on for a start. But yeah, that was how I sort of got into it. And it's just that habitual nature. You just have one, and then you have another one, and then you have another one. And it's sort of just out of maybe boredom in a way, because you're not really thinking about it. So you just, you know, top your glass up because the bottle's still open. So you just keep going.
And do you think that's the taste that kept you going, or was it the fact that it obviously has the relaxing properties that kind of makes you feel more chilled and mellow? And what do you think it was that kept you going with it?
I don't know. I think it's a bit like having an open packet of chips, isn't it? You know, because it's open and it's there, you just keep drinking it. But then you do, you know, after, for me at least, you know, after a few, it started to set in. And then you felt all good, you know. But, you know, for me, I guess the worst part was the next day, just not feeling 100%. And I didn't like that part of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, you mentioned the bag of chips thing, and this is what we'll talk about when we're talking about like eating and mindlessly eating and drinking. And obviously we're trying to do things mindfully. So like if you're going to have some crisps maybe, or chips or whatever you call them, put them in a bowl, and then like put the packet away and just take what you want, because as you know, you're more inclined, if you've got that bag there, you're just going to go back to it. And if you've got that open bottle of wine there on the table, you're more inclined to top up the glass. Whereas if you pour a glass, and then what I'll do is like I can make a bottle of wine last 2-3 weeks. Savage, I know, but like I will just pour a glass, put a stopper in, and you know that'll be me done. Like I'll be satisfied, and it like 9 out of 10 times I don't want a second glass. I'm fine. But that's usually is like a Friday or Saturday night or something like that. I do enjoy a glass of wine, but just like Sandy, if I'm doing a dedicated kind of period where maybe I want to lose a little bit of body fat, I generally remove alcohol. It's not through any other reason than the fact that it doesn't align with my goals at that given time. So like when that becomes a bit more of a priority, well, the inclusion of alcohol just doesn't really have an appeal, because I would rather have that than that kind of short-term gratification. I find a lot of people refuse or like struggle to give things up because they've still got this very black and white thought process, like it's all or nothing, and they're not allowed alcohol, or they can't control themselves with alcohol or even food to a certain degree. They think they have to be strict. And I guess that's one of the things that we could talk about is like, you know, it's the same with food, how people manage it, especially if they've got an issue with it. I mean, overconsumption versus like being an alcoholic are two very different things. You know, they're not maybe alcohol dependent, because if they are, they probably need help. But it's kind of like food. You can overconsume it and not be a food addict or something like that. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, guys.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting topic, because when it comes to this food, like food addiction, which, you know, I think none of the four of us don't really think that that's the same as it is with drug addiction or alcohol addiction, but we have these very realistic, very real feelings of addiction or loss of control around food sometimes, and but it's different than with drugs or alcohol, and where with food, often one of the ways that we deal with these feelings of addiction or out of control, at least in the intuitive eating space, and there's a lot of research supporting this, is that people who struggle with these feelings of addiction, it tends to stem back to restriction, actually. So there's some really interesting studies where, and they've done some of these things in rodents, which but we've also seen it in humans also too, where you tend to see the addictive behavior around food and sugar and these kinds of things when you restrict. But when you have regular access, and where a process called habituation, where you basically become accustomed to that particular food, then it loses its sort of mystique, and the appeal diminishes when it's there regularly. But with alcohol and drugs and other things like that, is that it's very different. And so, you know, you wouldn't tell somebody who's struggling with alcohol that, oh, it's probably because you're restricting yourself around alcohol. be less restrictive, because usually alcohol is used somewhat in similar, there's some parallels with it in the sense that we use it to numb certain feelings or to deal with emotions, rather than dealing with it at the root. But it's still different in the way that it impacts the body and impacts the mind and stuff too. And so I don't know, have you guys found that a challenge when you're addressing somebody who's eating emotionally versus somebody who is drinking too much?
I found it quite difficult, actually. I've had a client, she must have been going into lockdown, which obviously didn't help, increased her drinking. The situation she was in, she was a single mum on her own. She didn't particularly like evenings, and she found that drinking that bottle of wine, which often led to 2 bottles of wine, and that is for one person, which is a lot of alcohol, made her evenings disappear. And then it's a whole new ball game, because that's not really in the realms of nutrition coaching. That's more about the psychological and social issues going along underneath it. And so I did find that very challenging, because she wanted to make all these changes, but she just could not give up that crutch in the evening, and in the end I sort of said to her, I think you probably need more help that I can actually give you to get through that part of your life, so it is difficult.
Yeah, especially if somebody's really has a true alcohol issue going on, or at least some kind of borderline thing there. Because I do think that so many of the things that we do with clients, where we talk about mindset and when we're dealing with emotional eating and kind of helping them identify what are the triggers that seem to result in turning to food for comfort and that kind of thing. And you could use some of those things with somebody who's also turning to other potentially destructive behaviors like alcohol or drugs or excessive exercise or whatever it is. But at the same time, it can easily cross over that similarity to something that really does need to be addressed by someone else who specializes in dealing with alcohol issues, just like we wouldn't have a drug and alcohol counselor counsel somebody on their issues around food and that kind of thing.
So how about just talking about how alcohol can affect either our weight loss goals or our performance goals? If you're trying to build muscle, you're trying to gain strength, or you're trying to lose weight, because it can have an effect on all of those concepts.
I mean, the way I see it, alcohol's just the physique killer. It has no real I think everybody just wants to try and get away with murder when it comes to attaining, like, they don't want to sleep, they want to stay up all night, they want to drink, they want to eat rubbish in excess, and so on and so forth. I guess from a coach's perspective, it's just trying to get people excited about what they're working towards, and realizing that alcohol doesn't serve their goals. As I said earlier, I came from a background of just being heavily into alcohol, probably borderline having an issue, smoking, and I think it all stemmed from just having little to no direction, and it filled a gap. So once I was able to get excited about a particular thing, my thing so happened to be bodybuilding, it just it almost phased out, and I was less interested in that because of its impact, that it kind of drew me away from what I actually really wanted. So obviously sleep isn't as good if you're drunk, although you feel like you pass out, as sleep is disrupted, which has a knock-on effect the next day. So if you are training, performance is going to be hampered. Recovery is going to be also it's going to be to the detriment of recovery. You're going to be tired, energy expenditure is going to be lower. Obviously the consumption of alcohol itself has calories in it, so usually if you're drinking spirits, maybe the mixer also has calories in as well, and then your inhibitions are lower. We tend to crave saltier, fattier food when we are a little bit intoxicated. So getting kind of all of energy balance, it's not just alcohol itself, it's the knock-on effects. And as you said, alcohol has no storage capacity in the body. So like the body kind of recognizes it almost as a toxic thing and prioritizes the metabolism of that, where everything else goes into just pure storage, fat and carbohydrates.
Yeah, and that's the bit that can really affect people's weight loss, isn't it? Because if you're eating, if you're eating in a deficit, and that includes wine. I mean, I have had a client once who incorporated their 650 calorie bottle of wine into their daily allowance. Now, I'm not advising anyone does that, so please don't take that as a go. That was not my. He told me that after the effect. He did still manage to lose weight, but at the sake, at what compromise, So, it's not necessarily just a glass of wine or a gin and tonic or something that is the problem. It's taking you into a calorie excess, and then your body storing the excess calories as fat, which the alcohol doesn't help, does it at all? And what about the health implications? Because it's not just as simple as alcohol has calories, etc. There's also health implications too.
Yeah, I think there's physical health implications, and you were talking before we started recording about the impact on possibly increasing risk for a number of different cancers. But then there's also the health impact from a mental standpoint too. And I think that it's interesting as we're talking about it kind of from the fat loss perspective. This is a word that I was looking at a little bit a couple of weeks ago that was kind of a new one to me. It's Drunkorexia. Have you guys heard that term?
I haven't heard that, no.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And basically what it is it's this idea where alcohol creates this disordered or kind of either or dichotomy with alcohol and food. So it's basically you get in your mind that I can either drink my calories or I can eat my calories. And so you start thinking of alcohol and food in terms of that and kind of this either or thing. And then so you find yourself not drinking so that you can eat more, or not eating so that you can drink. And really what, it kind of creates this distorted relationship with both alcohol and food when you're starting to you're basically restricting your food intake so that you can have the alcohol because the alcohol is that important to you, or vice versa. You're restricting your alcohol intake and you have this sort of dichotomous view of food based on the calorie intake of it, and kind of where you're kind of overthinking the impact on body fat storage. So what do you guys think of that idea?
Well, that's kind of what that client of mine was doing, wasn't he? Without a label, really. I mean, we had the conversation prior because he did tell me how much he drank, and there's never any point in saying to somebody, right, you can't do. He had to come up with his own solution, and his own solution was that he was only going to drink at weekends. But after the event is when he actually told me, oh, by the way, I didn't actually only drink at weekends. He used those calories, as you've just said, he prioritized that. So if his calories were 2,000, he'd knock off his 650 for the wine, and then he'd eat the rest of them. And because he was in a calorie deficit, he did lose weight. However, that doesn't take into account any nutrition, health, or risk of disease. So, it's not something that we would ever advocate, for sure.
I think that's what people don't understand, is the effect that alcohol can actually have on your body. And I don't think people understand that it has calories either. But people don't understand that it changes the way your body burns fat, and your body's going to focus more on breaking down the alcohol rather than concentrating on the carbohydrates and fats. So they don't understand that. I think because they can't see it, it's not impacting them, but it's damaging your liver, especially if you're having a lot of alcohol. So it's that out of mind, out of sight, I suppose. If they can't see it, they don't feel like it's doing anything to them.
I think that's not just alcohol, but liquid calories and kind of heavily processed food in general anyway. It just doesn't register. We bought a friend like a tiny little cake the other day for his birthday, and per sixth of this tiny cake, it was 250 calories, and this cake was tiny. If I'm getting so small. Am I getting that across? I mean, it wasn't a cupcake, it was like a tiny cake, but like it so it was bigger than a cupcake but smaller than your regular cake. I mean, it looked great, chocolatey, but I think the problem is most people, it just doesn't register. And I think most people who are struggling with weight management in general, they're just hugely underestimating all of the little things, the alcohol consumption, the liquid calories, the bites, licks and tastes, maybe sugar in the tea, the creams and all of that sort, milks and all of that sort of stuff. But like alcohol for me, one of the biggest struggles I just find with people who are just socially like their social life is their life, gets to like Friday and it's like, right. And it's usually they struggle the most with change because the weekend's a complete write-off, and it's almost to get to Monday and the restart, and then that perpetual cycle just kind of continues.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to mention the actual guidelines, and I don't know if they differ in the States or in Australia, but in the UK, our recommendations, as in the government and the NHS and everything else, is no more than 14 units a week. So 14 units breaks down to around 6 pints of beer or 6 medium-sized glasses of wine, and that's in a week. So they count 1 unit as being 10 millilitres or 8 grams of pure alcohol. And they're also recommending that you would spread that consumption over 3 or more days. So in other words, not binge drinking. So
I still find that a lot, me. I don't know whether it's you guys. It's
I
like
was
6
gonna say
pints
that.
in a week, but maybe that's just me
That's
being
because
really
we're not
sad.
drinkers, though.
Like, yeah, I just think I can imagine
I'm
some
pretty
people are like
sure-
6 pints. That's an afternoon or something.
I know,
Yeah.
that's the thing. I think because we aren't, or 4 of us aren't big drinkers, for us, it always seems like, wow, that much, but for a lot of people, that's a normal, even like daily consumption. It really is.
I think it
I'm
all depends on what people's trade-offs are. Can you be healthy and drink that amount of alcohol? Yes, I would probably say we are not normal. That's fine. Like at the end of the day, like I think for me, when we're working with a client, we're just trying to move them along the line, as opposed to, we know what happens when people try and over restrict or 180 their entire lifestyle. So we're trying to kind of get them to become the decision makers and start to make maybe more mindful choices around their alcohol and food consumption. So as like organically and as naturally as possible, they start like kind of making modifications to their lifestyle. All we can do is bring a certain degree of awareness and ask the right questions, like, do you think this type of lifestyle contributed to the problem in the first place, and what do we feel we could do in order to change things a little bit?
It is difficult. It's really difficult. I think probably being more aware of the health risks, because I don't think they are talked a lot on about alcohol, really. People talk more about the effect of how they feel and all the rest of it, but they don't really talk so much about, like they did with smoking. We know the risks of smoking, and that's much more widely accepted now. But I think because alcohol is so socially acceptable in our society, that we don't talk about it. And I almost feel like it's the other way around. And if you are a bit like us, like you've just said, we're not normal, but aren't we, just because we don't drink? That's the perception that people have, that people that don't drink aren't normal. And I think that's what we're up against with people that do drink a lot. But some statistics, or they're not statistics, from facts from the course that I've just done on alcohol and cancer, is that 2 or more alcoholic drinks a day increases your risk of colorectal cancer, and 3 or more increase the risk of stomach cancer and liver cancer. So, there are some real serious side effects, not just weight gain or feeling a bit crappy the next day. It can have a serious effect on our health. So I guess for some people, if you're listening and your alcohol consumption is quite high or above the recommended amount, then that is something to take into consideration. Well, it's a bit doom and gloom, isn't it? But it's a fact.
I think everybody to a certain degree knows the risks. Like, I think at the end of the day, we're not here to stop people having fun. We're not the fun police. So we're just
people might argue that.
and like, I enjoy a drink, and I will very occasionally go out and binge drink and feel like hell the next few days, like a few days. That's where it is now. How I used to do it in my early teens. No, I wasn't that bad, but 18, 19, going out, and again, numerous days, I don't know how, but at the end of the day, it's just about that kind of overall big picture balance that you're trying to strike. And it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And I think that's sometimes why the fat loss industry really struggles, because of the fitness industry and people getting into it, because they feel like they have to lead that life. It's either chicken, rice and broccoli every meal, or so far in the other direction, and training numerous times. And people still think about me. I train they'll go, oh, don't you just train all of the time and eat chicken, rice and broccoli? And I'm like, no. But for some reason, people still got this mentality of these 80s, 90s bodybuilders that they'll see in these magazines. And even it's just that whole entire stigma attached to being healthy. People don't want it because they're associated with boredom. And that's why even on my grid, if you'd like, social media, it is showing, hey, I have a drink, hey, I eat food, proper food. It's about knowing how you can do that, and how you can kind of get away with it and still be fit, healthy and strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess that's all of our topic for today. Has anyone got anything else to add before we finish off?
I guess we could just finish with a couple of recommendations, just things to be considerate of when going out drinking. I don't know if anybody has anything.
I've got some tips, because again, from that thing that I listened to yesterday, they did put up some tips, and that was just really for reducing your consumption. And that was things like opt for a small serving, so rather, if you're at home and you're pouring, we know we've got a bottle, we open it and we can just pour till the glass is full. Maybe choose a smaller glass. That can help. Not a jug. Dilute your alcoholic drinks, so use a non-alcoholic mixer, and if you are watching calories, then use a diet one or a sugar-free one. Drink non-alcoholic drinks between your alcoholic drinks, so that will help you from a hydration point of view, and also from not having too many calories and alcohol. Avoid salty snacks. That's a good one, because you go to a bar, you used to, I don't know if you still do with COVID, you get peanuts on the bar, it makes you drink more. It's a great bar tip, that one. Drink slowly, don't down it, and don't stock up on alcohol. So if you are at home and you are a drinker, then watch your food environment. It's the same that we talk about with snacks, isn't it, and everything else. Watch your food environment. Don't have a bottle out on your counter. Put it at the back of a cupboard somewhere, so you're not less likely to be tempted. And there is the buy low alcohol or alcohol-free alternatives there, but personally, I don't see the point in that. I'm like, if you're going to have something, have the real thing and enjoy it, and have it less often. That's just me.
Yeah, those are some good tips, and I picked up a few from an article I was looking at earlier that called mindful drinking was the way that they labeled it, and these in particular kind of stood out to me, kind of because they align really well with the intuitive eating perspective, and so some of them were exactly what you were saying there, Sarah. and which are I think are good. And another one that jumped out was when offered a drink, decide if you actually want it before saying yes. And this is something again where I was talking to my clients about the fact that some of the things that they're working on in intuitive eating carry over into so many other areas of their life, whether it's setting up boundaries or again tuning into yourself. And so, you know, another one was before having a second drink, tune in with your body. How are you feeling? Do you need some water, food? What would a second drink actually do for you? So you're sort of just taking a moment to pause and just evaluate where you are, and you're making the decision based on that, not because, oh, I shouldn't have a second drink, but you're actually saying, well, what would that do? Am I, you know, am I cool with that? Yeah, I am. So I'm going to have the second drink. So you sort of take the good, bad moral value away from it, which can be really helpful from a mindset perspective. Not restricting food before, during, or after drinking, and then try experimenting with occasionally not drinking, and then kind of ask yourself, you know, what would it be like to decline alcohol in these different kinds of situations and when everyone else is drinking. And so really kind of changing it from this, oh, I need to drink less, or, oh, I need to drink less because I'm going to be eating more. So instead of that mindset, kind of coming at it more from a curiosity perspective, exploring how it makes you feel, how it impacts you, and that kind of thing. And I think on top of those specific, like how, like where you were saying, you know, use diet mixers or swap this out for that and that kind of thing. I think when you combine those things together, it can be a really good way to help deal with that and kind of navigate the alcohol side of things.
Yeah,
with the inhibition thing though, with alcohol, that's where like after one drink, you know, questioning yourself and all that. But after 7, you know, it's like, hey, like should I have another? Let's get one, and all of that stuff.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. It hits you different. You know, with food, you don't have that same inhibition kicking in with the impact that it has.
But I think for me, sometimes it can be as simple as like people you don't want a spotlight on you. A lot of people, especially in social situations. So like, you know, if you genuinely don't want to drink, but like you can literally drive, take the car, and nobody bats an eyelid as soon as like, oh, you got the car and all of that sort of stuff. Like nobody kind of questions. So you can like put legitimate reasons why you're not drinking, but like we want to maybe get you to the point where you're confident enough to go, oh no, I'm all right. And like leave it at that. And if people question you, then you can question why they're questioning you.
Yeah, like, I always think that it's more their problem than yours.
Exactly.
That's a good life skill to have in general, is just having those boundaries set up, that when somebody, you know, where you go out to dinner, everybody else, you know, this might be more of a, you know, it's not trying to stereotype women, but a woman thing where you go out and all your friends are ordering salads and light lunches, and you're like in the mood for a ribeye and mashed potatoes and dessert, and you go ahead and you go ahead and eat the works, and they're all nibbling on their rabbit food and feeling confident in that, you know, that can
but the difference is when the person who gets what they want genuinely leaves that meal satisfied and doesn't go away and kind of get what they actually wanted later on or at some other time, whereas those people who are trying to be overly restricted eventually break their unsustainable rules that they've got. And it's the same with alcohol. It's like, you know, like I'm on a stag do in a couple of weeks and, you know, wow, all day, and I'll be drinking a lot of alcohol, but that represents such a small part of my life. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to go my wits end and live with the short-term consequences, and that's pretty much it. Like
Cool.
All right, well, I think that's our episode wrapped up for today. So thanks guys for our little insights into alcohol, and I hope it was helpful to those who are listening. All right, so we'll all see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.